Hi. So yeah, this movie is insane. Yesterday, as of recording, I went and watched The Sudbury Devil, a movie made by Montage Films, directed by Andrew Rakic. He's a YouTuber who has been on the platform for a good amount of time, making like historical content. Just a lot of interesting stuff, and I really would recommend his YouTube channel called Timey Films, like I said again. So he made a horror movie, and he's a pretty funny guy. I don't know why for his first feature film he decided to just jump straight into horror. It doesn't make much sense given that most of his stuff on his channel has been comedy. So the rest of this video is gonna have like spoilers for the movie, but I recommend just watching the video. The movie is worth seeing if you want to see an insane movie that is just completely wild, but not that great in some ways, but also in some ways it's really interesting. But they're extremely limited screenings. I went to the only screening in my area, so take that into consideration before watching this video. So the movie, it takes place in 17th century New England, somewhere in the US, right? Sometime in the 17th century. It takes place in Sudbury town, which is a real town, I think, but what the film mostly based. So it takes place in the 17th century in New England, and so everyone in the movie talks like old-timey. They're like, "Do not be afeard, my brother."
May I feel that I am a stranger and a pilgrim on earth. Declare in plain lie that I seek a country. The title to it becoming daily more clear. A maintenance for it more perfect. A foretaste of it more abundant.
And it's like, wow, that's fun. Doesn't get annoying at all. It actually doesn't get annoying. It kind of works. It surprisingly. But it is kind of hard to understand at parts.
Declare in plain lie that I seek a country.
So the story of this movie is pretty much some witch hunters come to this town to say hello to a possessed guy. And so they're like, wow, we're gonna fix your witch problem in the Sudbury town. And so these two guys and the possessed or whatever happened to him, they go out to the forest, and they were like, wow, this is a really great idea to go out to the forest and look for a witch. Really. So they go out, and the movie's pretty good at this point. It's actually really great. I like this part. It has some really fun dialogue. Well, fun, but it has some really interesting dialogue, and it's just a very cool, interesting concept so far, right? So they go out to the forest, and they set up camp. And actually, a really cool thing here is that Fletcher, I think it's Fletcher that asks him. Fletcher is one of the witch hunters, and he is missing an eye, because the only way you can tell these two witch hunters who are like default white men, the only way you can tell them apart is that one guy has a giant ass eye patch on his eye. So Fletcher, the guy with the eye patch, he asks the possessed guy to point and tell him, where did you see the witch? Which, makes a lot of sense and isn't completely ridiculous. Anyway, he puts his hand out and he goes, ooh. And it's a really nice tension-building scene. Yeah, there was some music, but it works really well. It's a good scene. This movie has some really great stuff in it. I'm gonna call the possessed guy the skinny guy from now on, because there's no way I can figure out the names of these people. The skinny guy, he starts having spasms and stuff during the day, and it's pretty creepy, It's like, wow, that's cool. So I thought I was gonna go down the route of mental illness in the 17th century, but it just doesn't, which is interesting. I mean, I think that would have been really cool. They did that kind of thing in Hellblade with, that game? You probably don't. Well, maybe. I don't know. Psychosis and schizophrenia in the past is actually really interesting. So they don't go down that route. They go down a completely different, less interesting route that's kind of weird. Oh, yeah, okay. So the first night, there's this cool moment where, Fletcher's asleep, and then this, lady who we find out was, the witch, but also was, the wife of some guy, of, the director who plays a character in this movie. It's cool. She walks her fingers in his mouth and then eats the freaking saliva. It's gross, but it's a cool moment. The next night, Fletcher wakes up. He notices that skinny guy, the funny little guy, he's not there anymore. So he goes up and he's like, I wonder where he is. So he goes out to the forest and just immediately finds the skinny guy, which it's like, that's not how being in the middle of the forest in the middle of the night worked. But okay. And the skinny guy is, how do I put this? He is slim in his gym, or wonking his willy, if you will. And they just show it. They just fully show the and then he licks it. And it's just really, really, really gross. And I wish that it wasn't there. So it's from that point on the movie kind of devolves. They then tie up the skinny guy because he's just gone kind of crazy. They tie him to a tree, and it's like, man, you gotta do that, and you're gonna tie him to a tree. Okay, I guess. It's kind of weird. Anyway, so then, I don't think it's the night, but a little bit later, the two witch hunter guys, they find some stuff. They go out to the forest, there's a smoke trail, and then there's this black lady there, and she's like, hi, I'm a borderline racist stereotype. Who are you? And so it's kind of interesting because, so she's wearing a African mask thing, that it's just nondescript African mask. It's like, okay, I guess. So then they bring her back tied up, and the skinny guy's like, man, I know that lady. She's the lady from my town, and she's pretty cool. She's a Christian woman. They're like, no Christian woman has a racism word mask. It wasn't bad. It was interesting, and I thought that they actually did a really cool, interesting job portraying, racism in the past. These two guys were just brutally racist, and it's like, yeah, that's probably how they would have acted. And then the movie just gets even crazier. So I'm just gonna go over a few things that happen in this movie. Woman does the funny hand thing, and then that makes Fletcher go, ooh. And so then they do the funny deed. And then she gets pregnant and gives birth, but then also she dies. There's this lady that we find out was the wife of someone, and she has a cut on her face because Fletcher cut her face up with his sword because he was a soldier. I forgot to mention that. Anyway, he cuts her face, and she's like, wow, ouchie. And it is then crazy because there was this moment where she and a nondescript African lady start, and the skinny guy does the funny thing that he was doing before, which is just really interesting. Anyway, this movie is wild. Then it ends with a ridiculous fight between Fletcher and the lady from the beginning and from the middle and from the end, and they stab each other and stuff, but then her guts come out and it looks really bad, and that's where we get to the problem, to the kind of big problems with the movie. There are a few things. First of all, just it has some really weird technical problems that it's just like, this wasn't competently done at all at points. It's like a lot of the shots are completely overexposed. It's like, why? I mean, it doesn't look terrible, but it does look amateur. And then they have just the worst visual effects. Like, so there's this sky, right? And so they show the sky, and there's the tree line, and the sky's completely blown out, and they put like ink things, and it's like, that's not how a camera works. You know that, like, if the sky's blown out, then anything in the sky is gonna be blown out. By blown out, I mean like completely white. And so you can't just like put something up there, because that's not gonna look right. So you have to completely replace the sky. There's just weird stuff like that. There's a rock that explodes, and it just like, wow, that's, I mean, you put the thought in our head, and then you did that with the rock, and it's like, you can't, there's no way, like, that, I don't think it was intentional, but if it was, like, kudos to you, man. That was actually, that's not bad. So by the end of the movie, the last big fight, there's these like just bright like lights, and you would see them a little bit before, and so it's like, it's just the modern city and stuff. So her entrails get out, and then they start having fun time. And so after like stabbing each other and being completely covered in blood, I'm worried that the guy that made this has a little bit of a thing for that. Are you okay, man? Like, because I want to talk to like a sex therapist about that. Yeah, that happens, and she gives birth in front of the fire like they had tried to do before with the black lady, but you know, she was a black lady. I mean, you couldn't do it. She was too impure, which is kind of what it seems like the movie is saying, which is just wild. I don't think it was trying to say that. So she gets swallowed by a big mysterious white orb that had appeared before, and she dies. But then there's, like, the Sudbury Devil that's there, and Fletcher, he's like, wow, that's the Sudbury Devil. And he says, hi, Sudbury Devil, can you do a bunch of cool stuff for me, like tap on the windows and be creepy? And then the movie ends. I haven't even gotten into the fetus. So the biggest problem with the movie is that it feels like it can't really decide whether it's a comedy or not. It's like, you got these jokes, and it's like, you can have jokes in a serious movie, and that's fine. And those jokes worked pretty well. But then by the end of the movie, with her, like, guts coming out of her stomach, which was, by the way, just a sausage tucked into her, like, into her pants, it was like, that looks really, really bad. Anyway, there was just so much blood. It was like, oh my god, are you trying to make a Sam Raimi movie, or are you trying to make who directed The Witch? And at points it kind of feels like it's like an A24 movie, but at other points it doesn't feel like that at all. It's like if someone tried to make an A20, it feels like an A24 film reject. It's like, that's too bad. That's the Sudbury Devil. I really wanted to talk about it because it's a kind of cool thing, though. It's like a really small indie film, and it's cool. So, you know, I'd say watch the movie if you can, and come back and tell me what you think about it, because it's a weird movie. Okay, after we came out of the theater, the way my mom described it was, if Who Killed Captain Alex had a baby with Blair Witch Project, and it was like, yep, that's kind of got it right on the mark. But like, without, I mean, it has the heart of Who Killed Captain Alex, but not the way that you would want it to be. So that's a weird movie.